The Book of Boba Fett Episode 5 Return of the Mandalorian has finally been released, and let me just say this is one of the greatest episodes of Star Wars live action ever told. We got a fantastic look at the horrid events of the Night of a Thousand Tears, the reason why Bo Katan was doomed to fail as the leader of Mandalore, and Mando getting himself a brand new ship. So let's break down everything that went down in this incredible episode and how it connects to the other Star Wars books, comics, TV shows, and games. As usual, remember to leave your episode rating out of 10 in the comments and subscribe for a whole lot more Book of Boba Fett content throughout the show. So the episode begins inside of a butcher shop staffed by guys who look kind of like a subspecies of Clatoonians with bulldog features. I don't know about you guys, but the facial structure and sounds that they made really reminded me of bulldogs. Either way, right out of the gate we get the appearance we've all been waiting for from the holder of the darksaber himself, Din Djarin. Surprisingly, Mando isn't on the warpath to liberating Mandalore with Bo Katan and the others, and is instead back in the bounty hunting game looking for a man named Boba Fett, who is literally the man standing right in front of him. The man refuses to hand himself over, so Mando drops the infamous line, "I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold," which is one of the first lines the character ever said on screen back in Mando Chapter 1. Din Djarin then gets into a massive brawl with the guards of Boba Fett and is forced to pull out his weapon, the Mandalorian darksaber. Now, if you're watching this show, I assume you've already seen The Mandalorian, but you may not have seen The Clone Wars, which is where this artifact originates from. The darksaber usually denotes the current ruler of Mandalore, and in order to take it by traditional rules, you must defeat the current holder in single combat. During The Clone Wars, Darth Maul defeated the holder of the darksaber, Paz Vizsla, and claimed the throne of Mandalore for himself. Bo Katan Kryze, however, who we saw in Mando, refused to accept his rulership of Mandalore because he was an outsider, even though he won the saber fairly under Mandalorian tradition. The saber then ended up with Sabine Wren from Star Wars Rebels after she took it from Darth Maul's lair on Dathomir before she gave it back to Bo to rule. At that point things get cloudy and we don't know how Moff Gideon stole it off her, but we of course know that Mando defeated Gideon to hold it. After the brawl, Mando then viciously slices the man he's looking for alive, showing us the other half of that quote. This time he's brought in cold rather than warm like he did in the Mando Episode 1. After leaving the target's office, we discover that Mando is actually on a structure known as an O'Neill cylinder, which is actually a real-life concept where a rotating ship provides enough gravity to sustain a colony in space. Obviously, we haven't hit that level of technology yet in the real world, but it certainly is a real-world and science fiction concept which is very popular. It also really reminded me of a similar structure from Knights of the Old Republic. Either way, Mando is pretty badly injured from mishandling the darksaber in the encounter and limps through the streets of the cylinder. Mando then gets into an elevator with a strange alien, which is actually a Cascadag species from The Force Awakens. Really cool little connection, and one that's pretty deep from the background of those movies, and they also showed up in The Mandalorian, so that's pretty cool. Following this, he drops off the bounty to his client but refuses to take another one because of his terrible injuries. He then returns to a nearby area of the cylinder where the Mandalorian covert has now been moved to, denoted by a Mandalorian mythosaur. The mythosaur is a creature which once roamed Mandalore many centuries ago before being wiped out, quickly became the symbol of the Mandalorian people. Inside we see the armorer who clearly survived the earlier extinction of the covert on Navarro, but we also see that at least one other made it out alive. The member who survived the horrible events of that dark day was actually Paz Vizsla. Paz Vizsla was the heavy armored Mando played by Jon Favreau, the show's writer, and was later confirmed to be related to Paz Vizsla and other members of House Vizsla and Clan Vizsla, but we'll get into that later in the breakdown. Now, for those of you who don't know, House Vizsla was often seen as the ruling house of Mandalore before the pacifist movement led by Satine Kryze during the Clone Wars. Satine became the pacifist duchess of the planet during that war, and was also the secret lover of Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was tragically killed by Darth Maul right in front of him. Very sad story, and you should definitely at least watch the Mandalore arc of the Clone Wars if you haven't seen that before. Paz Vizsla then reveals that only 3 of the members of the covert remain, while the armorer is curious about what weapon could have caused such a wound. She is then shown the darksaber and realizes its impact and significance to the Mandalorian people. The armorer then very clearly explains that the one who wins this blade in combat is given the right to rule Mandalore only if it is won legitimately. She says that if, however, the person does not win it in combat but is handed the weapon, it then becomes a curse unto the nation. Mandalore will be laid to waste and its people scattered to the 4 winds. This is very significant because this is literally exactly what happened with Sabine Wren handing the blade to Bo Katan. In Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, Sabine had doubts about her leadership ability, so she handed the blade to Bo Katan to rule the people. She accepted the darksaber and the Mandalorian people bowed before her, but as we know from The Mandalorian Season 2, Mandalore was laid to waste under her watch. As we see later in the episode, the planet was completely destroyed and some believe it doesn't even exist anymore. This line from the armorer is a perfect metaphor for what happened after the events of Star Wars Rebels and why Bo Katan lost the darksaber. Really, it was fate, and it was probably the Force guiding these events, honestly. We know that the Force binds everything together, and that includes the Mandalorians. The Force tries to bring balance not just between the Jedi and the Sith, but also other warring factions. After this, the armorer gives Din Djarin a history lesson telling him that the darksaber was forged over 1,000 years ago by the renowned Mandalorian Paz Vizsla, who was both Mandalorian and Jedi. We do already have a pretty good history of him from both the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, although he is still a figure shrouded in mystery. We'll definitely get more story about that in The Mandalorian Season 3. Right after, Paz Vizsla asks Mando how he got the darksaber, and we find out that Moff Gideon has been sent to the New Republic for interrogation. Now, they aren't too happy about Din Djarin keeping him alive, as he has the blood of millions of Mandalorians on his hands. The armorer then immediately warns Din that Beskar should only be used for armor and not weapons, as it can pierce other Beskar armor, making it a threat to all Mandalorians. Mando agrees, and the prized spear of Morgan Elsbeth is quickly melted down. Pretty sad honestly, as I love that weapon, but it's serving a better purpose now. The armorer then immediately tells Mando the cautionary tale of Bo Katan Kryze. Obviously, her perspective is slightly slanted since the Children of the Watch are an extremist cult of Mandalorians, but she claims that Bo Katan lost her way because she claimed rulership of Mandalore based only on blood and the darksaber, not having won a traditional battle. As we know from Rebels, the darksaber was handed to her by Sabine Wren, not won in combat. She then tells the tale of how Mandalore was completely obliterated in the Night of 1,000 Tears, which was first mentioned in The Mandalorian Season 1 by Moff Gideon. We see thousands of TIE bombers completely savaging the planet and what looks like its capital, Sundari City. In the shot, we see the domed cities which were prominent in the Clone Wars series because the Mandalorians ravaged their own planet in war over the years. Sadly, these cities too were destroyed by K2 units, the same as K2SO from Rogue One, who were sent onto the ground to finish the job. And a very interesting point that the armorer makes is that her cult, the Children of the Watch, were able to make it out of the Night of 1,000 Tears unscathed because they were on the moon Concordia, which, as we know from the Clone Wars TV series, was the home base of the Death Watch, and they were actually exiled there by the pacifist Mandalorians led by Satine. Paz Vizsla, who held the darksaber during the Clone Wars before Maul, was exiled to Concordia, and he was actually the governor of Concordia. So it makes sense that whoever survived the purge on Concordia were the descendants of the Death Watch, and therefore named themselves the Children of the Watch. So that's an awesome little connection to Star Wars The Clone Wars. The armorer then moves on to forging a specific item out of the spear for the foundling Grogu, and then she can be heard chanting a traditional training hymn in Mandoa, which is the native language of the Mandalorian people. We have seen it before in The Mandalorian Season 2, but this is yet another instance of the language coming back onto the big screen. During his training with the darksaber, Mando mentions that the blade is getting heavier with every move because he is fighting against the blade, not with it. This is a direct reference to Star Wars Rebels, where it was established that the darksaber gets lighter as you gain affinity with it. This was particularly helpful to Sabine Wren in her training with it with Kanan Jarrus. After this, Din Djarin is challenged for the darksaber in a traditional Mandalorian duel by Paz Vizsla, who wants it because it was forged by his ancestors in House Vizsla. Before the battle, we even see Paz Vizsla ignite a type of Mandalorian energy shield, which was very common in the Clone Wars and was even seen at the Siege of Mandalore used by Bo Katan. Bo Katan was also a member of the Death Watch, so it makes a lot of sense that Paz Vizsla would also have this shield. This duel ends in a very dicey victory for Din Djarin, but horribly he is then expelled from the covert for having removed his helmet. Obviously, Din wants to atone for his sin to the clan, but he can only do so by visiting the living mines beneath Mandalore's oceans, which he believes no longer exist due to the Empire's destruction of the planet. Following this sad event, Mando is forced to disarm himself completely to board his commercial shuttle to Tatooine, which is piloted by a droid similar to Rex from Star Tours if you've ever had the opportunity to ride Star Tours. His ship then arrives on Tatooine, and at the port you can see a few gates in the background. These gates are actually the Ralph McQuarrie concept art gates, which are seen in a lot of Star Wars media, including The Force Awakens. Near the port at Pelimoto's shop, we also get a glimpse at a BD unit, which you might remember from Jedi Fallen Order, where one was Cal Kestis' companion throughout the game. Really awesome little Easter egg there, and definitely for those of us who are fans of Jedi Fallen Order. R5-D4 from A New Hope, which was the same one with the broken motivator, was also there, along with the same pit droids from The Phantom Menace. Obviously, I won't go deep into these, as these were all seen in the Mando Season 1 and 2. As Mando makes his entrance to find a replacement for the Razor Crest, Pelimoto drops heaps of references to Mando Season 1 and 2, including the slaying of the Crate Dragon, the issue with Toro Calican, and the roast that she gave Mando when he left with the Frog Lady. Either way, Peli then offers Mando a replacement for his destroyed Razor Crest, which happens to be an N1 starfighter personally commissioned by the Queen of Naboo herself. We're not sure yet which queen this is, but it could definitely be when Padme was still in office, or it could be the one after her, Queen Jamila. Or it could even be Sasha Saruna, who would be the current reigning queen, but since it's pre-Empire, that's not likely. Now after this, we get a couple more shocking reveals, being that Pelimoto dated a Jawa, and that Mando is a bit of a connoisseur for ships himself, and he really knows his stuff. These details will definitely come into play later in the story, I'm sure. As Mando is constructing the ship, the BD unit is able to project the position where Mando needs to attach a part. This is exactly what the BD unit does in Jedi Fallen Order, except with maps of planets and locations. Toward the end of the construction of the N1 starfighter, Peli begins giving Mando a picture of the Pikes and how they're feared across Tatooine, and not even law enforcement will even touch them. This is some definite foreshadowing for Mando playing a huge part in the gang war between them and Boba Fett. Due to Mando's, let's just say, hatred of droids, Pelimoto chooses to remove the standard astromech port for the ship, and in its place is pretty clearly going to be a place where Grogu goes in later in the series or in The Mandalorian. Mando then tries out his new N1 ship and absolutely zooms through the streets of Mos Espa, before giving us a huge callback to Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace, as he takes to the same Mos Espa circuit where Anakin raced in the movie, or at least a similar outcrop area. Mando even arrives in Beggar's Canyon, which we see in The Phantom Menace, and is of course where Aurra Sing is posted up. Eventually, Mando goes up out of the atmosphere of Tatooine and is pulled over for speeding by 2 New Republic X-Wings, and Carson Teva from The Mandalorian Season 2 recognizes his voice. The guy in the other X-Wing was also Max Lloyd Jones, who was a stunt double for Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian Season 2. That's awesome and hints that he'll have more work to do in this series, if you know what I mean. I think we're getting Luke Skywalker next episode. Mando obviously doesn't want to answer too many questions, so he jets back off to Pelimoto, and the 2 X-Wings don't want to fill out the paperwork, so they don't report it. And finally, the episode ends off with Fennec Shand popping into the shop and hiring Mando as muscle for her and Boba Fett's new criminal empire. Mando agrees to join for free, but not before he attends to one other little matter, that being finding Grogu. So next episode we'll probably see the Mando team up with Boba and Fennec to go find Grogu with Luke. Now I'm absolutely hyped for next episode, so let me know your episode rating out of 10 in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, really hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers guys, hope to see you in the next one. Drop a thank Mr. Din Djarin in the comments if you made it this far.